president's ongoing trade war with China is creating a growing divide in the GOP. Many of the businesses feeling the effects are in states Mr. Trump won in 2016 and are represented by Republican senators. One of those is Senator Pat Toomey, a leading member of the Senate Finance Committee, who joins us now from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Senator, our trade war with China escalated this week. President Trump put the Chinese telecom company Huawei on a business blacklist, and China cut its orders for U.S. pork, and Chinese state media became more nationalistic. Here's what the president had to say about all this.
We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly for many, many decades, for actually a long time. And it should have been handled a long time ago, and it wasn't, and we'll handle it now.
Senator, how worried are you about the escalating trade war with China?
Chris, thanks for having me. Listen, I put China in a distinct category separate from the rest of the entire world. And I do that because of the facts in the case, right? China is the world's second biggest economy. It's a revisionist power. It's now, for the first time, attempting to be able to project force. It's intimidating neighbors. It's disrupting American institutions. And it's engaged in some egregious economic behavior, the theft of intellectual property in various ways. So I actually think the president is right to challenge China. This agreement, if we reach one, won't solve all of those problems. And the tariffs are absolutely painful and dislocating. But if, in the end, we end up with an agreement that gives us a meaningful reform of China's most egregious behavior, we might look back and say this was worth the price that we're paying. I look at 232 tariffs and tariffs on Europeans and Canadians and Mexicans in a very different way.
Those are national security tariffs, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And I put those in a very different category. But I think the president is right to challenge China and to think about this in the broader context, such as what Vice President Pence laid out in a famous speech where he made the case of how aggressive China has been.
Now, farmers are among the folks that have been the hardest hit so far by the U.S. tariffs and the response from the Chinese. But the White House says, well, they've got a plan, and they're talking about up to $20 billion as a bailout to farmers. Here's the president's message that he sent to farmers this week.
They'll be planting, they'll be able to sell for less, and they'll make the same kind of money until such time as it's all straightened out.
But you call this plan, quote, your words, very bad policy. Why?
Yeah, I think it's bad policy to, start just sending checks to farmers or any segment of the economy. What I think we ought to be doing is working with allies, working with friendly countries, finding more markets, opening up more markets, taking down trade barriers, and creating an opportunity for our farmers to sell their products around the world rather than sending them a check from taxpayers.
Generally speaking, it's fair to say you're a free trader. You were former president of the Club for Growth. What are your thoughts about the president's trade policy and his willingness in an effort to try to, and he says that, to try to bring down tariffs, to raise tariffs at least in the short term, which sometimes goes on for a while?
Yeah, so the way I look at tariffs, they are a tax on the American people. They can only be justified if they are a means to an end. In the case of China, I think we might be pursuing the right end. I think in the case of Canada and Mexico, for instance, on steel and aluminum, we were not pursuing the right end. I think the changes that the administration has made to NAFTA actually diminish NAFTA as a driver of economic growth and prosperity. I think it would be a huge mistake to impose taxes on the auto imports, for instance, from Europe and Asia. I think that would be a huge cost to consumers without a good objective. So, I'm going to continue to push back on the use of national security as a justification for imposing taxes on Americans when they choose to purchase products from our neighbors and allies and friends.
Let me turn subjects with you. President Trump proposed a dramatic new immigration reform plan this week, and for legal immigration. I want to talk to you about that. Currently, 12% of green cards are based on skills, and 66% are based on family. The president would flip that to 57%. based on skills and 33% based on family. As the grandson of Irish immigrants, how do you feel about this, the president's proposal for this new system?
So it's mixed. I think so I'm very much open to expanding legal immigration. I think people who come to this country wanting to build a better life for themselves and their families, they contribute to America. They help to build this country just as my relatively uneducated and penniless grandparents did when they came here. So I'm open to more legal immigration. I think the president's right in his insight that people who come with a lot of human capital, intellectual capital, education, these people contribute to our country enormously. It's a no-brainer to allow people who come here, the best and brightest from around the world, come to our colleges, get a great education, and then we ship them out so that they can compete against us rather than welcoming us. So I fully embrace the idea that these people with greater skills and education and knowledge should be welcome. But I think people with lower skills can contribute as well, so I'd be open to expanding that category as well.
I want to ask you another question on immigration. The Department of Homeland Security says the overcrowding, and there's no question there is, on the border in Texas, between Mexico and Texas, has gotten so severe that it has started flying illegal immigrants to San Diego to hold them there, to process there, and conceivably to release them there. They were also going to do that in Florida, but there was such a backlash, including from the Republican governor of Florida, that they stopped that. But apparently DHS is considering continuing this. How do you feel about the idea of shipping people in this country illegally all over the country?
Well, Chris, it's a symptom of a complete full-blown crisis that we have at our border. They are swamped. They are overwhelmed. The numbers have been staggering. We've got a humanitarian crisis and a security crisis. So we need to respond to that. We need better border security. We are building, and we need to build physical barriers, walls. We need more personnel. We need more surveillance. And we also need the ability to adjudicate these huge numbers of people who come here. They ask for asylum. They have very, very little case to be made for granting an asylum. But we're encumbered by having inadequate resources to adjudicate those claims, those requests. That's a big part of it. We've got to change our laws that are driving people. America's a magnet.
But
if you come here with a child, you're almost guaranteed to get in. Yeah.
Senator, just to cut to the chase here, because we're running out of time, how would you feel if DHS shipped several hundred migrants to Pennsylvania?
Yeah, we actually do house some migrant families, and that's, a temporary arrangement that is made necessary by the crisis on the border. I'd like to fix the crisis so that that's not necessary.
Okay, let's one last subject I want to talk to you about, and that's Iran. Over the last week, the president has taken a number of measures. He's ordered a carrier strike group to the Persian Gulf. We're sending long-range bombers there. The Pentagon at least considered a proposal to send 120,000 U.S. troops to the Middle East. Really, two questions. One, do you understand what's going on with U.S. policy in Iran, and how do you feel about, as you do, if you do understand it, what the president's policy is?
I think I do, Chris. I took the time to go down to the secured briefing room and read the intelligence reports last week. I'm looking forward to the full briefing to all senators on Tuesday on the intelligence we have. I can't comment on that, but let me simply say this. If you read a report about a potentially imminent threat to American personnel and American assets originating from the Iranian regime, I think you should take that report very seriously. Let's remember who we're talking about. This is the regime that systematically designed, manufactured, and distributed the IEDs that were designed to penetrate armored vehicles and kill American soldiers in Iraq, and they did in large numbers. I think the president is right to try to deter the Iranians from a foolish and dangerous attack on American personnel or our assets, and I think that's the strategy right now. Demonstrate with a show of powerful force that this would be a really bad idea for the Iranians to pursue, and hopefully deter a really tragic and disastrous decision by the Iranians.
Senator Toomey, thank you. Thanks for sharing your weekend with us. Please come back, sir.
Thanks for having me.